Let's talk about Keir Starmer. He is lurching from crisis to crisis. He's got various advisors quitting all over the shop. His personal approval ratings have hit -42, which is kind of Prince Andrew levels of popularity. And there's also the great Andy Burnham is over the water, making signals that he potentially wants the leadership. How exciting, Tom? How excited are you for Andy Burnham leadership?
I've barely been able to sleep. It's been absolutely fascinating. I mean, Starmer versus Burnham, it really is the sort of battle of the beige, isn't it? It's kind of Radio 3 versus 6 music.
Because the Tories, back in the day, the Tories had Boris waiting in the wings.
Yeah.
And whether you like Boris or not, you could argue quite a glamorous political figure.
We'll mix things up.
Bring back Boris. But it's not the equivalent with Andy Burnham, is it? He's not Labour's Boris.
Not in the slightest. And also, it's one of those things where because Keir Starmer is so rubbish, anyone looks good stood next to him, I suppose. But, Andy Burnham is just a different variation on the same theme. I mean, both of them are, politically speaking, really insubstantial. I think both of them are characterised primarily by their own political ambition rather than what it is they actually believe in. In both cases, have kind of drifted somewhere between kind of the Blairite wing and the more soft left wing of the Labour Party, depending on what was politically expedient. You've got Andy Burnham, who has developed this image of himself as the sort of almost semi-anti-establishment candidate. He's up there, Mayor of Manchester, running against Westminster. But he was in Westminster for more than 20 years. I mean, I think he became a special advisor in 1998. He held various junior ministerial and then actually Secretary of State positions under Blair and then Brown.
Straight out of Oxbridge as well.
Exactly, straight out of Cambridge University. And yet has now tried to re-establish himself as some kind of outsider railing against central government. And I'm amazed that anyone takes it seriously. There's been a few kind of quite gushing profiles of him talking about, essentially buying into this sort of image of himself and that he's so much more down to earth because he says lad a lot and wears jeans, as if that's enough to make you a breath of fresh air. The one thing he certainly has in his corner is the fact that, unlike Keir Starmer, he comes across more like a normal person. But is that really the great compliment that people seem to think?
Is there an argument? Has he got the pulse of the Red Wall, given where he is as mayor?
Well, I think because Manchester's a bit of a special case, particularly, Greater Manchester is still very much a big student population. It's the sort of place which is not dissimilar from London in many respects in terms of the makeup of the constituencies there and the sort of views of it. And that's why this kind of King of the North moniker that he's basically given to himself, as far as I can tell. I mean, what do you mean, the Northeast, which voted so heavily for Brexit, a vote that you want to reverse?
Yeah.
Are you talking about those various parts of the old Red Wall which are now moving towards reform in a big way? Just because the students of Manchester University think you're the best thing since sliced bread clearly doesn't mean that you speak for the vast swathes of the north of the country. So it's telling that he has been resurrected, because this guy, he ran for the Labour leadership twice in 2010 and 2015. When he lost to Jeremy Corbyn, it was so humiliating. He was seen as a complete flip-flopper, didn't know what he stood for. It was just embarrassing. I mean, there was one moment in 2015 where he was went over to Mumsnet to do the kind of Q&A, and when they asked him what his favourite biscuit was, he said it was chips, gravy and beer, because he was so authentic.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this guy was a joke 5 minutes ago, but I think by dint of the fact that Starmer is just all over the map and is flailing, and there is no clear sense of what he stands for, people are more willing to go towards him. But I think it is just like a kind of reminder of the populists and the populist electorate are often dismissed as being a bit low information, not thinking about things too deeply, easy answers, whatever. The Burnham phenomenon, if we're even going to call it that, is purely about vibes.
Yeah.
There's no substance there. There's no policy, really. It's telling that people are so won over by it in the kind of SW1 media
the
sphere.
flavour of what the policy might be, and this is going to have to come from any replacement to Starmer, is to take the government agenda leftwards.
Yeah.
Which I've always argued there are times, during times of plenty, when that sort of progressive agenda has been appropriate.
Yeah.
And I voted for New Labour a couple of times, and the economy, thanks to actually a legacy of Kenneth Clarke as Chancellor at the tail end of John Major's premiership, which was riddled with sleaze, but actually they managed to get the economy back on a sound footing. And so that was a time when, you've got a sort of a Labour government that can splash the cash, put money into public services, all the rest of it. And so anybody that replaces Starmer is going to, increase taxes further. I mean, Burnham's talking about 50% top rate. which I think brought less money in when Gordon Brown introduced it as Chancellor, or I think became Prime Minister. That was one of his flagship policies.
Yeah, when he became Prime Minister, yeah.
You know, and so, it's very unfortunate for the country that if Starmer's replaced, we're going to shift leftwards because, as I say, there might be moments in our history where that's appropriate. But given the fact that our debt is so high, that the gilt yields are so high, that no one wants to lend money to us in any way cheaply, that if we were going to go further left and spend more money and borrow more money and raise taxes further and kill growth, I mean, it's just, you know, kind of a crazy scenario where you're careful what you wish for. It's like we need to hang on to Starmer because the alternative...
Starmer and Rachel Reeves.
And by the way, it's interesting how it's taken 14 months for this Labour government to become the Tories.
Yeah.
They've turned into the Tories, right? It's like everyone is jockeying for position. The race for the deputy leader, deputy prime minister is unedifying. You've got a cabinet minister in Bridget Phillipson who's accused her boss, or at least the number 10 machine, of being sexist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an off message, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? This is, Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair are like they're sort of spinning in their political graves at the catastrophe in terms of the messaging out of this government. I mean, why Bridget Phillipson, hasn't been fired or resigned as a result of that. But it's such a basket case administration that that's not even a story.
It's nice, isn't it? The quiet, as Otto English said after the election, or Andrew Marr, Britain has become a haven of stability.
By the way, Labour do have a Boris, though. And it's Angela Rayner.
Ooh, that's actually a good shout. But it is interesting, Mark, as you say. I mean, they're sort of fighting the 2010 election all over again. It's like they've forgotten that we went through the COVID period where, we borrowed £300 billion. Borrowing at the moment in apparently normal conditions is similar to how it was during lockdown. It's reaching those kinds of levels. We have the highest tax burden since the Second World War. So any of these sort of, as you say, these sort of left-wing ideas might be appropriate at some point, but you think you've got to smell the coffee as to where we actually are. We've not been, we're not in a period of high, coming out of austerity or something like that. We're in a period of very high spending.
I've always thought that a crisis tends to get rid of politics. So an economic crisis, essentially, there's no longer, if you look back at 2008 and the coalition government, this was... And, it was just two parties with diametrically opposed views on a number of issues, including economy, the Lib Dems and the Tories. But they came together to do austerity. At the time, I think it was 2010, 2011, where the cost of government borrowing the interest on it was 60 billion a year, which was an unmitigated disaster. Well, it's double that now.
Yeah.
But they came together. And so politics tend to subside when there's a crisis. And we are now in the throes of an economic crisis. And what ought to happen is the politics ought to subside again. And what Starmer and Rachel Reeves need to do is say, I'm afraid the manifesto's out the window. And even just our philosophy as a governing party is out the window. Because what we've got to do is stop an almighty crash. But will that happen? They're going to have to swallow a big political pill to do that.